In 2020, my life changed as I expect it did for millions of others across the world. And to those among us who woke up to these fantasies that we're the victims of long before that, I can only apologise for taking so damned long to get it. I'd spent most of my life dedicated to the science and history, even self-publishing a book on the history of science about 15 years ago, a book which I hasten to add I've hopefully deleted all reference to. For my sins, I was even an expert on the Apollo space program, so if the me from 2019 was listening to what I'm about to enlarge on, he'd laugh and call me a crackpot. We people new to the truth community in 2020 first became aware of the medical lies, and then most likely after that were woken up to the myths surrounding technology and its threat and the ridiculous legal world we're trapped in. After that, we become embroiled in deep rabbit holes with sinister aspects like the truth surrounding the secret societies, world leaders, conflicts, and significantly to this presentation, the truth about previous cultures. I'll simply summarise what most in the truth community now believed based on irrefutable evidence. What we'd refer to as old world structures weren't constructed by the characters we're told built them. To believe that primitive hand tools like chisels and hammers, with horses and carts etc., dragging hundreds of tons of masonry through muddy tracks on wooden wheels without any paper legacy as to structural surveys, financial arrangements and a whole host of other anomalies truly stretches the credibility of the official narrative, and so we have to ask what the real truth is. It also appears that these older structures encompass much more than impossible architecture, but also exotic technology related to energy and healing, and those in charge today must know the truth, and they're keeping our legacy from us. Because of this, we have to try and decipher what we know is true, what's distorted, and what's downright lies as we connect the dots of this elaborate, enigmatic puzzle. Now, there are four main points held by the truth community that I'd like to address. 1. Today's societies are the result of one grand, controlled reset of worldwide societies following a single catastrophic event, or alternatively, 2. Our societies have been reset on multiple occasions. 3. That we can rely on old books to show us evidence of the past. And 4. There was a grand worldwide empire known as Tartaria that was usurped by today's controllers. Whatever's disputed amongst our community, I think all of us agree on one point at least. Our current era, which I'll refer to as the plastic era, is the result of our worldwide societies being usurped by a sinister power who are trying to reinforce their control on us in ever more severe and brutal ways. When, how and where these events took place, however, is where we struggle to join the dots in a logical format. So I'll give you my take on this. When we look around at old buildings and cities that are either in a state of decay or almost total destruction, we have to ask about timelines. Now, many researchers will claim that all of these cultures were destroyed in a single event, which simply doesn't add up. Now, these various structures were destroyed in different ways. Some apparently burned, melted, others by flooding, and yet more by a mysterious mud flooding event. And many of these structures are geographically close to each other, and the destructions involve different methods to one another. We also see evidence of structures being built on top of previous cultures, which shows that not only were they destroyed at different times, but also significantly that their proliferation means that all members of these cultures must have been aware of these exotic technologies from antiquity. This raises another disputed aspect, commonly believed by some members of our community. where it's claimed we've been reset by manipulative controllers on multiple occasions. Now that makes no sense. If we look at our plastic era, we find that a controlling elite will build none of these exotic structures, even denying their true purpose, the impossibility of the construction, and trying to destroy all evidence of them completely. How is it then that whether it's an Olmec, Far Eastern or Tartarian, there's that word, culture, that the proliferation of these structures were widespread at the time? Now, this technology wasn't hidden in any way. In fact, the workforce themselves must have constructed them. And the proliferation shows that this technology was available to the entire community. Now, this stands in stark contrast to those claiming multiple resets by controlling elites, and leads to the inevitable conclusion that our plastic era is the first controlled reset, and that previous cultures were the victims of cataclysms that cooperatively rebuilt their cultures. So to summarise, there have been multiple rebuilds, but only one reset, and we're living through it today. The advent of photography seems suspiciously coincidental, either following hot on the heels of or during the alleged establishment of every major corporation, every archaeological discovery, sports team creation, technological invention, and so on, and appears to be a point in time where those in control had sufficiently consolidated their hold after the last cataclysm. While still performing these clean-up operations, they felt confident enough to snap the clapperboard and shout, "Action." Now, this consolidation up to that time must have taken scores of years, maybe 100. But knowing the love of symbolism and numerology, the dates given of 666 and 1776 appear to have great significance to these shadowy figures. And this is why I tend to lean towards the late 17th, early 18th century as being a logical date for that cataclysm itself. Another anomaly that frustrates me is researchers who point to ancient books as an indisputable record of evidence being from the stated time period. We have to realise that these usurpers have destroyed any documentary evidence to the old cultures, whether it be paintings, maps or other documentation, and the only evidence they haven't destroyed or squirreled away are the edifices in stone, which they're desperately trying to erase as an ongoing agenda. Firstly, we have to realise that anything published from around 1700 on was produced within our reset plastic era anyway. And so while conceivably being maybe a second-hand presumed narrative handed down by word of mouth by its author, or basic remnants of a technology that the parasites would later withdraw, is much more likely to be a pure fabrication. And let me enlarge on this. We have books purporting to be from what would refer to as the medieval era, where we see everyday life depicted. They'll show agricultural techniques and other scenes from daily rural life, but then, wait, what's this? On other pages we see these primitive characters erecting cathedrals with their basic hand tools. Now they can't both be right. We'll have to come to the inevitable conclusion that all of these archives are pure fabrication. Ask yourself how far in advance of us these previous civilizations were, and then compare those documents to today's graphics. Let's look at basic maps, where intricate, specific, detailed geographical details are illustrated. Also ask yourself about the standard of even the most basic graphics we use today, where whether they're professional adverts or amateur renderings, the perspective is representative of reality. How is it then that we see these so-called old world maps, paintings, etc., with childlike rendering and perspective? Are we seriously to accept that cultures so highly advanced would produce such infantile perspective and rendering? Now, my own opinion on this is that these are deliberate fakes, produced to implant a subconscious message that these graphics are from a more primitive culture, feeding that narrative that today's plastic culture is the most advanced there's ever been. This then leads on to another flawed narrative. I mentioned Tartaria earlier, and for those unaware of what this term is, I'll just summarise what it refers to. On many supposedly old maps, there are references to an ancient kingdom known as Tartaria, represented by a griffin. There are even documents showing flags of the world where this Tartarian griffin, and also an owl, are shown as representing this culture. Now, many truthers have settled on this as being evidence of this empire being the previous culture to ours that was usurped back in the 18th century. If it's the case, and it seems inevitable, that all documentary evidence is faked, then you also have to accept that those wishing to deceive us also inserted this Tartarian legend into the narrative to be found by us. But why? My take on this is that it's analogous to a tactic we're familiar with seeing in today's propaganda, the stand-down ploy. Now, this involves pre-arranged assets being put in place for skeptics of the mainstream narrative to stumble across. A kind of filter to siphon off those who slip through the net of control and are then led down a false path. So many truthers who saw through the lies of these usurpers found the enigmatic Q, an alleged rogue shadow force fighting the controller's hold on us. Donald Trump and others like Elon Musk, all capitalist billionaires, were touted as champions of freedom, and the message to those who fell for this deception was, it's okay, you can stand down, we've got this under control. Similarly, the Tartarian narrative seeks to convince those who fall under its spell that whether we live in an age of emancipation or tyranny, kings, rulers, emperors ruling over societies is the natural order of things. So why would they do this? Well, in my opinion, there were never nations or countries in the contemporary sense of the word. Areas of land would necessarily have names, but merely to distinguish one plot of land from another, and had nothing to do with political or tribal boundaries. In other words, there weren't kings and slaves. Instead, all areas of the world were sovereign, without the need for controllers. And it's this fact they don't want you to realise.